Remember when Dallas was in the 2022 Western Conference Finals? Because I certainly do. They went on a really nice playoff run. They beat Phoenix. They really looked like this up-and-coming team they could guard. Of course, they had Luka. And now we're looking at a situation that is very, very negative in Dallas. There's a lot of stuff to talk about here, but I really feel like there's a bit of a lack of understanding in terms of what's actually happening with the Dallas Mavericks right now. Really quickly, though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, SoRare. SoRare is a sports fantasy game and marketplace featuring officially licensed digital player cards from the NBA. And right now, you have the opportunity to play against me as well as the rest of the community, and there are two different ways to play. You can sign up and play for free in common leagues to see how you stack up, or you can purchase limited cards to play in the limited contender league for a variety of different prizes. For example, this is the winner of the limited contender league for game week 44, Blanket Bob, and he gets a $100 NBA gift card. Here's what I really love about this though. It allows you to be the GM of your own fantasy team because you can really get into this and figure out who you think is going to continue to play well, where you can find good value from some of the lower level players and cards, and that's the true value for me in SoRare. For example, when you look at last week, some of the biggest performances came from young guys on tanking or semi-tanking teams, guys like Walker Kessler, Jaden Ivey, Jabari Smith Jr. These were some of the biggest performances of the week, and they're coming from players that count less against your cap, because in these leagues on SoRare, you have a points cap that you have to stay under while building up your lineup. But if you're getting star level production out of some of these kinds of players, that is a huge boost. That's a strategy that plenty of you guys used last week to perform well in the league, and that's something that I'm going to continue to use as well moving forward, looking for these players that are going to get some more playing time in the last couple weeks of the regular season and really capitalize on the value that that provides on these tanking or semi-tanking teams. So if this is something you're interested in, you can click right now in the description to sign up for my private SoRare NBA League. If you sign up using the link, you'll receive 20 free common cards to help get you started, and with these common cards, you can enter my common pickup tournament. And just like I mentioned earlier, you can join the limited contender tournament during game weeks 46 and 48 for your chance at winning a $100 NBA store gift card. Again, you can click that link down in the description, and thank you again to SoRare for sponsoring this video. Now, there's a couple of things that really need to be understood here, including something that really discourages this idea that Luka Doncic could be asking his way out or getting traded relatively soon, which we're going to talk about later. But I feel like the first place that we have to start is the way that this front office has put talent around Luka, because time after time, if there is a superstar that does want to go somewhere else, most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, it's because the team has failed to put a competitive roster and a championship level roster around them. There are other reasons. Some guys just want to live in certain areas. Some guys just want to play with particular players. But for the most part, if you can put a championship level group around a superstar, regardless of location, they're going to want to stay, they're going to want to stick around, and you don't have to worry about the possibility of them requesting a trade. However, Dallas has not done a very good job. Really, you could argue that over the last, 8-9 years, the best thing and the only really good thing they've done is bring in Luka. It was an incredible draft night trade. He falls to 3, they move up to 3, and they end up getting him. Of course, they trade away Trae Young and a future first round pick, and it was an incredible move. And ever since then, there have been just a lot of missteps. There aren't a ton of players on this roster right now, or that have been on the roster over the last couple of seasons, that were like homegrown players that Dallas was able to add around Luka. And even when they've gotten those really good homegrown players, they've ended up letting them go for one reason or another. One, Dorian Finney-Smith, who was traded away in the Kyrie trade. Trust me, we're going to get to the Kyrie trade. Jalen Brunson is a huge deal here. Someone that they could have re-signed to an extension, someone that they lowballed, someone that they could have just continued to add more money until he decided to come back this past offseason. He's been incredible in New York and is at least a borderline all-star caliber player that they just let walk for nothing. Then you have the Kristaps Porzingis trade as well, which I understood why they took the swing at the time. I really liked the deal at the time, but all the injury stuff with KP really held back the potential of that pairing, and it didn't really seem like Luka and KP got along that well. And again, when you miss on a couple of big moves like that, and you don't have the draft picks either to show for it because you traded them away, or you didn't make that many smart selections over those years, and the guys that you did end up bringing in, like Finney-Smith and like Brunson, are now gone, you're suddenly looking at a situation in Dallas where they don't have that much of a future other than Luka. Like, if you took Luka out of the equation, they're probably one of the worst teams in the entire league. And of course, that's going to happen when you take away a player as great as him and everything is built around him. But you'd like to have some other pieces here that you're excited about. And that brings me to what, the most recent front office quote unquote mistake here, and that is the Kyrie Irving trade. Now, I was not a fan of the Kyrie trade at the time because of a situation exactly like this. The possibility that Kyrie just being there, as well as the team potentially not being as successful as you'd want it to be because of a lack of defense and a lack of size, puts you in a situation where there's all of a sudden all this pressure on you in a negative way around Luka Luka, and it's just a complete disaster. Now, Kyrie hasn't done anything, off the court or anything like that has torpedoed this situation the way that he possibly could have, and I'm not blaming this on him, but the possibility of something like this happening is one of the reasons why you shouldn't have made the Kyrie trade in the first place, because now you're looking at a situation where you owe some future draft picks, you don't have a ton of flexibility there. Kyrie could leave for nothing in the offseason. You could sign and trade him, which we'll talk about here a little bit later, and there's some options there, but there's really no upside. You put all of your eggs in the Kyrie basket, and despite the fact that off the court he's been fine, on the court they can't guard, they can't rebound, they're too small, and even with as much offensive firepower as they have, they've been one of the worst teams in the league when both of those guys play together. I should say, by the way, to be clear, their team record, when those guys are on the floor together, they don't have one of the worst ratings in the league, but their team record overall is just not very good. And to me, this is pointing towards, I think, something that a lot of people are going to continue to point out, and that is Luka going to ask his way out? Is this a possible situation where in a couple of seasons or in even just one or two off seasons, Luka's, possibly going to New York or LA or a variety of different destinations? Well, something that needs to be understood here that I feel like everybody's glossing over is this has never happened before. And I don't mean, requesting a trade. That happens all the time. What I mean is international players, which by and large are dominating the top level of the sport, by the way, and some of the best players in the entire league, most of the best players in the entire league are international guys. When you think about the MVP race this year, you think about Embiid, Giannis, Jokic, and of course Luka as well, who's been an MVP favorite going into the last couple of seasons here. We haven't seen an international player request a trade. Now that could be complete coincidence. That could be because there's less precedent there. That could be because some of the best players in the league until most recently weren't international players. But Jokic signed the extension to stay with Denver despite some relatively limited success. Giannis re-signed with Milwaukee despite having never made a finals prior to the extension. And Embiid to this point seems like he's really happy in Philadelphia, although that's something I am keeping an eye on depending on how they perform in the next couple of postseasons. Apart from that, there's really no, or I should say there is no precedent, including those guys, for an international player requesting a trade. However, I wouldn't necessarily feel super comfortable about this situation if I was a Mavs fan, because there's just, at a certain point, when you're someone like Luka that has had so much success in basketball throughout his career at a young age, he's not used to losing. This guy's won everywhere he's gone. He's been successful individually everywhere he's gone. And individually, he's one of the best players in the league. And as a team, despite the conference finals run last year and being relatively competent over his first handful of seasons in the league here, if you start going on a downward trajectory and you're Luka and you're someone that has just never experienced losing at this level, at a professional level, at some point, those thoughts are going to start to creep into your mind, especially if you go into this offseason and Dallas loses Kyrie for nothing. Kyrie signs a new contract somewhere else, or maybe potentially even more damaging, you're forced into re-signing Kyrie to the 4-year max, which I think is something that we're quickly going towards. If no one else in the league wants to offer Kyrie a 4-year max and Dallas does and he takes it, then you open up the possibility of Kyrie potentially having even more time to torpedo your team. And we've seen a couple of different franchises that he has done that to this point. And what that brings me to is there's not that many positive outcomes here moving forward for Dallas. Either Luka gets upset with all the losing and wants to leave, or Kyrie leaves for nothing, further decreasing the value of the team around Luka, which could eventually lead to door number 1 or door number 3. Kyrie re-signs and potentially torpedoes the team, again, leading you back to door number 1 of Luka potentially asking out. And there's just a lot of things that have to go right here for Dallas to fix this. They need to nail the draft pick this year, especially if they keep it. It's top 10 protected. They need to get some kind of value out of Kyrie, whether it be in a sign and trade or re-signing him. They need to, if they re-sign him, fingers crossed, hope that Kyrie doesn't ruin the entire team. And they need to hope that Luka is going to continue to be patient, which the precedent is with international players that he will be, but there's absolutely no guarantee of that. And this is the first time in Luka's career that I can really, really honestly say that there are way more negative outcomes than there are positive ones. And when you're a franchise like Dallas that's constantly thinking about re-signing their guy and making sure that he's happy, having this many uncertainties, this many question marks around your team is never, ever a good thing. And the last point that I'll leave you with is this. If you're a Mavs fan, I'm talking directly to you, what is the upside moving forward of your roster? Let's assume that Luka stays. You don't know what's happening with Kyrie. You assume you're going to get some value there. That was one of the reasons for the Kyrie trade in the first place, was because there's not a lot of teams that are going to be offering him this huge contract on multiple years. One of those teams was the Lakers. That's kind of no longer an option unless you want to do some kind of weird, cap space manipulation stuff there. You have to get some kind of value out of him, whether it be sign and trade or otherwise. And if that doesn't happen, this is pretty much the worst roster in the league outside of Luka. And there's you can talk yourself into being like a 48-win team, maybe, but there's no championship upside here. And traditionally, the first players to realize that there's no championship upside are those superstars. Guys like LeBron have set this precedent of paying attention to where your team is going, not just showing up to work every day and playing basketball, but looking at the roster as a whole and evaluating where it's going. How do we get to a championship level team if we're not there right now? Is that path clear? Do we have assets? Do we have young guys? Do we have an opportunity for some of these guys to continue to grow and develop? And yeah, like there's some relatively interesting, decent young players on this Mavs roster, but certainly nothing that you're overly excited about in terms of a championship level. And what that brings me to is I really think that if someone is going to break this precedent of international players not asking out, not requesting a trade, I think it's going to be Luka. I honestly would not be completely shocked if it happens this offseason, if Kyrie ends up leaving and he looks at the rest of the roster and is like, no Brunson, KP's gone, we didn't get any value out of either of those guys, traded away our best wing defender in Finney Smith in addition to another first-round pick. There's really no future here. Or more realistically, the following offseason, or potentially if Kyrie resigns even further down the line than that. But this is a really bad situation if you're Dallas. It's the worst situation you want to be in when you have a young superstar level player. And to make it even worse, I'm not even really sure how they try and go about fixing it.